Welcome to the Teacher Career Coach podcast with your new host, Elizabeth Sudo. She started her teaching career in 2014. She found she needed a career change after all the changes the pandemic brought to the teaching world. So she transitioned outside of the classroom into an administrative assistant role and now works as an operations manager for a tech startup. Get ready for discussions on all things related to teacher transitions, interview prep, addressing burnout in the classroom, and so much more. Here's your host, Elizabeth Sudo. Welcome back to the Teacher Career Coach podcast. You can find us on all your social channels at Teacher Career Coach or on our website, teachercareercoach.com. Welcome back to this next episode. Today, I'm so excited for you to meet Nestor. He's currently a software engineer, but before he made the switch into engineering, he was a middle school teacher with a focus on theology. He taught through the pandemic and noticed he was ready for a change after some of the differences he saw in education. Join us as we discuss hard skills, determination, and how to be prepared for difficult situations. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Teacher Career Coach podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Sudo, and today we're very excited to welcome Nestor to the podcast. Welcome, Nestor.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. This is a little weird. I've always wanted to do a podcast, so this is fun.
Well, I'm super excited, especially because you just mentioned that your sister found the Teacher Career Coach Instagram and then her friends follow it. So
Yes.
It's just like this small world coming together. So
Yeah, it is really cool.
Very cool. Well, we're excited to get to know you. You're in software engineering now, and we'd love to hear a little bit about the backstory. So what got you into education? What did you teach? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so my backstory, it's an interesting one. So when I entered college in California, I was a civil engineering major and I really wanted to become a civil engineer, but then I met, Calculus 2. And so, I kind of did like the regular college thing, didn't really focus. And then I was like, and so I ended up failing that class. But then the next year I decided, you know what? I bet if I put my mind to it, I could do it. So I tried and then it didn't go too well. so I was really like I was trying to figure out what was my next step. What did I want to do? What did I feel passionate about doing? And during that time, I was in youth group at a church not my church, but some of my friends were part of a youth group. So going to that, I realized, I really enjoyed speaking about Catholicism. And I ended up just like realizing that I wanted to become a teacher and I wanted to teach theology. I wanted to teach Catholicism and I wanted to do it in a meaningful, logical, and hopefully like through that, like life-changing way. I was really inspired to do that. Like that was my big goal. And actually, so I went to school, got my master's in theology, and then I taught a private Catholic school for 6 to 7 years. I taught middle school religion. And that was really fun. It was, my time as a teacher, I feel like if you were to plot it on a graph, it was like the amount of fun I was having just like slowly, gradually like went down. There were a lot of reasons why I decided to leave, but I don't want to understate the fact that it was a lot of fun. And I thought it was, it changed my life. It made me a better man. It made me a better person. And honestly, my family, we were just talking about this. It made me a good dad, honestly. Well, at least I hope it made me a good dad. Anyways, so yeah, I decided to leave for a lot of reasons. The big reason that I really struggled with leaving actually, but the biggest reason why I left was because I realized that, well, two things. One was that I really liked teaching, but everything else that came with teaching was very difficult. Whether it was the extra things, check boxes that we needed to do, or honestly, like the paperwork, grading was hard. There were a lot of I felt like there were a lot of hoops that I had to jump through in order to just do something impactful. At least
Mhm.
I thought it was impactful. And honestly, and this is like really humbling for me to admit, but after I felt like after COVID was really like the turning point in my teaching career. I just felt like after COVID, students became I grew more impatient, and I felt like students became less like they were more apathetic, and I have a hard time dealing, especially when I like when it's theology. Like I am really passionate about my faith, and so when kids like come into the classroom and they just don't care, or they're just there for the grade, that really irks me, and I couldn't handle that anymore. Or like not, I had a hard time dealing with it, and I knew that I couldn't do it anymore. Like I just knew that it was unfair, really, to the kids to have someone who was going to be impatient with them, someone who was going to basically just be, like hold a grudge against them because they don't care, and they're just kids. One you can look at it as like they're just kids, it's okay, but the other is like I wish they would grow up a little, but it's all good. So that was the biggest reason why I left.
That's very helpful to hear. And I think just good to hear because a lot of teachers right now are feeling that guilt. It's like,
Yeah.
well, do I want to leave? How do I know what the right time is? And it sounds
Hmm.
like, you knew exactly you weren't, it was that time to move on. It it wasn't the best fit between you two
Yeah.
anymore. And then I love the bit at the beginning about how you studied theology and got a master's in that, and then went
Yeah.
directly to teach that to middle schoolers
Yeah.
out of
Oh
all
yeah.
ages. So that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
definitely a memorable experience that'll be with you
Yeah.
for your life.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about, so now you are a software engineer. And how in the world did you narrow this down? This is a very specific hard skill. And how did you even know, like, that you were interested in it? Did you tinker when you were a kid? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Great question. So, I mean, I could go really far back to the MySpace days, and just I remember those times like messing with the colors and the font of my MySpace page. But I always thought that was cool. But really, actually, one day, really, the story goes like I was driving home from work one day, and I knew I had decided like I want to make a change. I need to make a change. So I called a good buddy of mine, and he suggested all of these things. I thought about my strengths first and foremost. So I thought like maybe I could do real estate, or I could like be a manager somewhere, like work with people more, like keep that people, working with people part of the teaching, but just with like adults. And so I was chatting with him about all of those different possibilities, and eventually, literally at the very end of our conversation, he went, "Have you tried coding? Do you code at all?" And I said no, and he said, "You should try. You should look at it. I'm gonna give you a website." He shouted out a Code Academy, and it's a free learning platform anyone could go on. And he suggested that I learn JavaScript. So I went there. So that night I went on and I spent like an hour and a half to 2 hours looking at it, and really my goal was to figure out if I could understand it and if I liked it. And I learned that in that short amount of time that I did. And so, I did a little bit, I continued to do that. I took a break because the school year got busy. And then during the summer, I did a little bit more free learning. And then eventually that led me to enroll into a boot camp, Codesmith. And that was a 9 month long program. And yeah, there was a lot of learning there. I was still working during the boot camp. That was a tough time. That was a lot of work. My wife and I, we rarely saw each other. It was like maybe Like we spent, very little quality time together. And yeah, so I did all of that. And by the time I had graduated from Codesmith, fortunately, they offered me a position to be like a TA. I did a little bit of that. Yeah. And I mean, during that time, I was still applying. During the time of the mentorship, I was still applying. But that whole time, pretty much, I had been learning. Did some self learning first for about like 3 to 6 months, and then Codesmith was about 9 months.
Wow.
9 months to like a year.
Wow.
Yeah,
That,
so about 1.5 to 2 years.
that's some motivation right there. And if you don't mind me asking, a lot of teachers are working full time in the classroom. They're upskilling on the side. They're applying to jobs, and it's very overwhelming. Kind of like what you mentioned. Was there
Hmm.
anything that helped you during that time to kind of like push through and survive?
Yeah. I mean, I could give a joke answer, but really, it for me, it really was like defining my why. I knew. I mean, I. So you asked me earlier, why did you leave education? Something that I didn't mention, and it was a huge part of it, was that I have a wife, and we have our son is now 4, and we wanted to grow our family. My wife is a counselor. I was a teacher. We just had gotten a new house, and we were really like our when it comes to budget, it was like there was barely any room for like investing or like emergency, any fun stuff, any of that. And so that was a huge reason why I knew I needed to make a change. And really, like at the beginning, I was like, oh man, what if I make like 200, 300K? I could get some cool stuff. But then I remembered, and this is what I'm trying to get at, is the why was I knew that what pushed me was that I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this so that we could grow our family. I'm doing this so that I could provide for them. I'm a huge. I just hosted a bunch of people, or my family hosted a bunch of friends this weekend, and I feel like I'm always like, "Hey, is everyone okay?" Like, so and so, like I feel like I take that to I definitely do that with my family. I want to make sure that everyone has what they want to an extent, and but also just remembering, like it's for them, and it's so that we could continue to grow our family, and so that I could provide. Yeah, that is my biggest piece of advice, would be to just define your why, and then when it's those hard moments, like I have a picture of my family right by my desk, and I just remember all of the things that yeah, just that motivate me. And honestly, it takes a lot of confidence, and that I mean, that's a whole different topic there. But yeah.
That's so good to hear. And I think that just knowing your why, I think that'll be
Hmm.
really helpful for people to just look to and connect with and persevere.
Hmm.
And then as we dive a little bit deeper into your actual position now,
Hmm.
um, there's so many different types of software engineers. It seems like, front end, back end, and
Yeah.
then within that, there's all these different languages,
Yeah.
JavaScript and
Yeah.
Python. So
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about that? Is that something you tried to learn all of them? Did you try to learn one and get really good at that? What's kind of like a pathway forward for those who are interested?
Yeah. That's a great question. It is really tough because I think that there are a lot of people out there that see something, me including, by the way, that see something, a new hobby, a new skill, a new whatever it is, and it's like, let's just take software engineering. Okay, what does a software engineer do? There's some that do front, that's some that do back. There are these languages, there are these technologies, and it's like I need to learn it all. And like kind of that completionist sort of thought, and really you don't have to do that. What I did personally, as I said earlier, I did do the boot camp, and the boot camp focused on JavaScript. It did do front. It was full stack. So when I say full stack, I mean you do like front end and back end, and really, and you do that with JavaScript. So basically, I just study JavaScript, but uh, I guess what they instilled in me, what Codesmith instilled in me, and what I have always tried to instill in myself and do for myself is um like I learned how to problem solve, and I learned like when I was learning JavaScript or when I was learning like certain technologies, what I did was like think about the very like foundational stuff that you're learning, because all of those foundational things transfer from language to language, from technology to technology. So, for example, one of the stories I like to tell is that when I was first hired, well, when I was hired, at least I think I was hired for a more front end focused role. They asked me questions on JavaScript and React, which is a front end framework for JavaScript. Uh, but my first my first task on the job was a back end, so the completely other side, a back end Java, uh, like with Java with Spring Boot, and that those are like you can't. I mean, you can get more opposite, but you know they're like it's like the other side of the coin. But really, like I said, was I learned how to problem solve. I learned how to really like software engineering. A lot of it is reading documentation. If you know how to read documentation, how to digest it, really long and somewhat boring, kind of dense stuff, you could definitely do it. So yeah, yeah. So I think I answered your question somewhat, but yeah.
You did. And it kind of brings
Yeah.
me to another question because you said, digesting information, reading,
Mm-hmm.
problem solving. Are there any like personality traits or skills that you can think of that, a teacher might have inherently that, or a person that might lend them towards software
Yeah.
engineering?
I think that one of the things that I truly believe, and some of the things that I try to sell myself on during interviews, were as teachers. At least my experience with teaching was always like, man, what is it called now? Differentiation, individualized teaching, things like that. Talking to families and seeing, when families call you or email you and they're like, hey, my kid needs this or that, really is like trying to figure out what they actually need, right? So a lot of the skills that I brought over from teaching were really like individualized, like figuring out what a user needs and delivering it to them the best way that you can, right? And sometimes sometimes the user, a family, doesn't even know what they want,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to figure that out for them and then create it, right? So I really do believe that those skills transfer over. I know that, and I really do know. I mean, I experienced it firsthand. You sit down and you're like, okay, teacher, software engineer. Wow, that's very such a drastic. But I truly believe, I really do. I really believe that teachers could make and do make great software engineers. I think if they could get over that technical hump, like the idea that you as a teacher, like I feel like you're working with kids most of the time. You have to explain things to them, and a big part of software engineering is technical communication, is talking to people about what you did, the decisions you made, and why that works out or why you believe that works out. And so, not a lot of software engineers do that. I think a lot of software engineers they don't, and I don't say this like to uh I guess to blanket a majority of the software engineers, but I do know that there are some that software engineers tend to be like, I just want to be on my computer, I just want to be on the keyboard and type and so I think that they're it would be great, or I think that teachers would be a great asset, to the software engineering field.
Those are such good parallels. And it makes me think too, like teachers communicate all the time with parents,
Mm-hmm.
district admin, all these different stakeholders. And so that was such a good way you explained it, where you're doing the same thing.
Yep.
You're taking this, digesting it, and being able to explain what you did to make things more efficient or effective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very cool. I'm curious to know a little bit about the interview process. I know it's competitive out there in the
Yeah.
tech world. So, what was that like? And then, how did you stand out in that process?
Yeah. Thanks. So I will definitely answer this question. I just want for everyone who is listening to this, I want to say first and foremost that like if you're trying to become a software engineer, um, and you feel like you've done everything you can, you're applying, you're not hearing anything back, just remember that it's a numbers game. And I always tell people this, like you sometimes you just get lucky, and that is either a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. And also not to let your lack of responses be a representation of how good or how bad of a software engineer you are. So I want to say all that to begin with, because I guess fortunately for me, I felt like I got very lucky with my interview process. So with this company, the interview process, it was so I applied on I believe I applied on their website. Then I had an initial interview. So I had an initial phone screen with the engineering manager. There, it was really the initial interview is mostly like, tell me about your resume. They really want to just kind of get to know you. No real technical stuff. You might need to answer some technical questions. Like, hey, have you worked with React? Like kind of your experience with these technologies.
Mhm.
And then, and so after that, usually, well, in my experience for this role, they immediately were like, okay, let's schedule a technical. And so, yeah, so they scheduled a technical interview with me about a week and a half later. And that was really so. I guess I'll stop there. I'll take a pause there and say, because you asked, how do I think I stood out? And honestly, after that initial interview, I was like, wow, I feel like I really hit it off with this person. Um, Honestly, I don't know, I just felt super confident that they wanted me, but they just obviously they also need to check your technical skill.
Mhm.
And that's what the technical is for. And I believe the reason why I stood out was because of my because of my personality. I think it was like my willingness to continue the conversation with her, to my willingness and my emphasis on collaboration, working with people, the way that I talked about how I like to problem solve and how I go about problem solving, how I communicate that problem solving. And so that's how I felt like I stood out. That was one of the things that made me feel like I stood out for the role. And so yeah, so I had the technical. Usually a technical interview. Well, there are many different kinds of technical interviews. Some of them are like, so sometimes you'll get like a take home. You gotta like build something, and then you go to a technical interview and you explain it. Some of them are like just do algorithms. I'm sorry, and like solve these really these really, some of them are complex problems in front of them. My technical interview was what I had like one really easy algorithm, and then they asked me a bunch of questions about some technologies that I used. And so, and this kind of goes with, I want to mention this because it kind of goes with the question you asked me earlier about what was it, like what languages did you learn, how did you go about it. So on the job posting, they had asked, they were looking for someone who did JavaScript and someone who did Java. Well, I didn't do Java. I had never written Java in my life, but I did know some things about Java and like some characteristics about Java. And I had done practice those kind of like, I guess like uh, that like type of framework, that type of thinking in with my other skills with JavaScript, with React. And luckily enough, I had also done that during my time at Codesmith as a TA. So when it came to the technical interview, they had asked me, "Hey, do you have any Java experience, or do you have any experience with this technology?" Which I didn't. But what I said was, for example, I said something like, "No, I don't currently have any experience with X technology, but what I do know about this technology is that it involves, let's say, for example, it focuses on object oriented programming, and you don't need to know what that means right now, but just follow along." And I said, and although I haven't worked with that, I do know what that is, and not only that, but I have worked with it in my previous projects with JavaScript. I have incorporated some object oriented programming, blah 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 blah. In other words, I was showing them like, look, I know the foundational stuff, and I know that with some time that I could transfer that over to and like be able to pick up Java.
Mhm.
So, anyways, that's how I handle those type of questions, because sometimes people they'll like, "Oh, I kind of know everything. I'm not qualified because I don't know Java," but it's like you do know. Like, okay, yeah, maybe you don't, but you are qualified. Just think about the other stuff you've done. Anyways, so I did that, and then they asked me some technical questions about JavaScript. They asked me some technical questions about React, about GraphQL. These are all like key technologies that I marketed myself for. And then this is like super fun. One of the people on the that held the technical interview said, "Okay, we have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I want you to build a calculator app right now." It was like, you didn't have to worry about the UI, the way it looked. You didn't have I didn't have to really show anything. I just needed to show them how I would build it with a technology, in this case React.
Mhm.
And really what I did there was, so this was a question I had not like prepared for. I didn't know they were going to ask me this question. Um, but I knew the underlying concepts. And so what I did was, as I was kind of thinking through and writing the code, I was talking. I'm going to do this because, when I think about how to solve this problem, I think like first I need to make the buttons. So in order to make the buttons, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, right? And just technically communicate that. So not only am I showing them how I'm thinking about the problem, but I'm also communicating to them like the process in which I'm going to do it. And yeah, and that was, I mean, I was able to successfully build, I think another key thing I want to put out there was a moment where I did get stuck. Or, well, actually, two key things. One was, there was a moment where I had said, "Okay, I think I want to solve the problem this way." And then maybe like 15 minutes later, I said, "Oh, I realize now that I need to change what I did earlier. And so, and I need to change it because of these reasons. And the way that I'm going to change it is by A, B, and C." And then, so that was one key moment. And then the second key moment was, when I got stuck, and I asked for help. I asked for questions. And I think that's really key, because it shows like, you're not afraid to ask for help.
Mhm.
And it also shows them like, yeah, you're not afraid to ask for help, and you're open to critique. You're open to, feedback. And I think that's a really, really key thing in software engineering, as a person in general. And so, yeah, so that was so I had gotten done with that. And then probably like, no, was it the day after? Yeah, I think it was the day after. The day after they called me and they offered me the position. And that was sweet.
Well, nice work. That's amazing. And what you said, I kind of noticed a key theme among all of it. When you started with the recruiter, the screening
Hmm.
call, technical interview, even at the end asking for feedback, is just communication. Like, you have to be a good communicator, engage in the conversation, ask them questions, talk to
Hmm.
them, and throughout, if you don't know something, that's okay.
Hmm.
Ask questions related to something that you worked on that has
Yep.
something to do with it. So I
Yeah.
think that's so important, because on the
Yeah.
employer side too, they wanna see that you're excited and engaged as
Yes.
well, and that, like, if you
Yeah.
work there, you have that skill to be able to
Yeah.
communicate with the team members.
Yeah, and I think too is like a big part of the process for like a big part of any job interview is these people want to see if they want to work with you, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, if you're gonna be like super quiet, and I mean, some people like people who are really, really quiet.
Mhm.
Like I said, I got lucky. I really do think I got lucky in that they liked me enough and I was able to pass a little test. So yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. And you had the skills and you had what they
Yep.
were looking
Yep.
for and you prepared too. So my next question is, what does it look like? Your day to day. Can you kind of just walk us through what you do after you get up in the morning and
Yeah.
what the day looks like?
Yeah. So I currently I work 8 hour days. I do work through my lunch just so that I could like get my day over as the work day over as fast as I can. Mostly because my wife and kid they come home from school around 4 o'clock. Anyways, I'm skipping ahead. But anyways, so I'll wake up, I'll have like a small breakfast, and I'll just like turn on my computer. Sometimes I will have, depending on the day, I will have it's basically a check in. Hey, everyone, what are you working on? What is your progress like? Are you stuck? It really is a quick 10, like an opening scrum, I guess, is like 10-15 minutes. And that is usually when I was on a consistent project. I'm kind of in between projects right now. Um, when I was on a consistent project, that was about 3 times a week. And then the rest of my day was really, and this is from my understanding, not typical, but anyways, the rest of my day is really me, completing the ticket, the tickets that were assigned to me. So sometimes what I'll do is if I first pick up a ticket, I would do some research, right? I'll read documentation or figure out what I really need to do. That's like a big part of like software engineering is what do you actually need to do, and then like what do you not need to do? Because sometimes it's easy to over engineer things, to think too much, and to try and do everything, but really you don't need to do everything. And so, anyways, so I'll do research. Sometimes that takes longer, like if you're picking up if you're trying to learn a new technology. So like for example, the other day they had said, or actually I'll start like the best example is with the Java ticket that I had, Java backend ticket I had. I had no experience with Java. I had no experience with that framework. So I went online and I looked at some tutorials. I learned Java. I forget which website I used, but I found some websites to teach me Java. And so I did some stuff with that. I watched some YouTube tutorials on like how to implement this framework, how to use this framework. I built an app by myself, like on the side, just to kind of get used to it. And then, so basically, like I did all the research and then I focused on the ticket. Usually, like when I was done with a ticket, I'd have to write up I would have to write up a dev record, which is basically like a report of what you did, the changes you made, how you could test it, things like that. And then you submit your ticket or you submit your code for review. You make any changes needed. In between that, you could also go ahead and review other people's code, things like that. But I would say, I guess, I kind of just gave you like a summary of like everything I do. But anyways, on a day to day, I would say like I alternate between, you know, I like wake up, research, work on the ticket, and then like complete the ticket, write the dev record, so on. And it's just like a cycle of that. I would say currently, and I say currently because I am in between projects, and I believe that things are gonna pick up pretty soon. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about that actually.
What you said, you are resourceful. And that brings me back to a point, it sounds like with software engineering, technology is changing rapidly. So you have to be resourceful because you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
to research because these things keep changing. It
Yep.
reminds me like at our company, our software engineer is like always researching these different things, keeping up to date. And it's
Yep.
just like fun to hear you say that. So yeah, you want that learner's mindset, you know, be resourceful.
Yeah. 100%.
Cool.
100%.
And you mentioned at the beginning of that, you have a wife, a family, a
Mhm.
child. So tell us a little bit about the work-life balance and how it has changed, if it has changed from teaching. Are there things that you can do that are more flexible?
Mhm. Yeah. Um yeah, I can. And it's easy to answer. It's amazing. But I honestly like one of the things that I um it's like the small luxuries that are just so amazing. I can use the bathroom when I want, believe it or not. Like no, but in all seriousness, yeah, the work life balance is great. I do work from home. I work work fully remote,
Mhm.
and it's funny. So I started in March, and yeah, that was great. I mean, I was able to just like do all my work, and then when they get home, I could hop off, and if I need to do more work, I could work, later on in the evening.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. Now that it's summer, I just spent like the last, their 2 months they've been in the house, so most of the time like they still allow me to like work, my usual, like do my usual thing basically. And but yeah, it is great because sometimes I do get to, like, if my wife needs help with something, or if she's like especially tired, yeah, I could take my son and and just take care of him, make sure that basically, yeah, it's great. Like I get to I get to my work schedule is flexible. My company emphasizes, like, yeah, we're flexible. Do what you need to do. Just make sure that that you're working the hours that you are said you're going to work. And yeah, it's great. I mean,
Mhm.
oh man, teachers out there. I know that I'm actually record right today. It's July 31st, and my wife, she who is now a counselor at the school that I worked at, she's going to work tomorrow. And
Aw.
she's like, oh my gosh. And so, anyways, oh man, yeah, the work life balance is great. Love it.
That's great to hear. That's very good. And in your new position, what does opportunity for growth look like? Is there any room for
Y-
advancement as you move forward in your career?
Yes, yes, there is a lot of room for advancement. So some of the things that they offer, like for example, so I don't, I guess I, unless I didn't make this clear, but I don't have a technical background. I don't have a computer science degree, but like my company has a perk that, like, they'll pay for college tuition, so I could go and get a computer science master's if I wanted to, and move up in the, for promotions. I know. So like, I like kind of hesitate to answer this question. Well, I don't hesitate as in like I don't want to answer this question. I'm just unsure. Like the other day, I filled out like a career advancement form, and I'm not exactly sure how that worked, to be honest. It was just like, hey, what are your interests? What do you want to do? And yeah, they do a good job of, at least they're always talking about, like, hey, we want you to grow. We want you to be where you want to be. If you want to work on, like, for example, if you want to work more on the front end side of things, and you can, just let us know. They do a really good job of listening to their employees. And so I'm sure, and I know that there is opportunities to advance. Quite honestly, I'm not 100% sure how that goes,
Mhm.
but like I said, I've only been there for 4 months now. I'm sure I'll figure it out sooner or
And that's
later.
I think that's great that they offer
Yeah.
that professional development. Like they want
Hmm.
you to be better. They want you to keep learning and getting value. So that's really nice and neat to know. Did you know that when you were looking at the company that that was a perk or?
Um. So when they had called me back, I was like, when they called me for the initial interview, or wanted to schedule an initial interview, I did look, and I was like, ooh, that's really nice. That's really cool. But then I was like, do I want to go back to school? But I probably should. I should definitely utilize that.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And I've loved it's been so nice spending the evening with you. And we kind of love to wrap this up with this last question here,
Yeah.
which is what have you learned about yourself during this process, transitioning, from a whole different career into this new technical career?
Yeah. Um, man, a lot. I really, I think the biggest thing that I've learned, is that, like, I could do difficult things. Like I could solve hard problems. I could go through the hard times. Definitely like this switch for me, like my family and I, we went through a hard time, like for in a lot of different ways, and it was definitely a sacrifice, and it was definitely a like it wasn't a smooth road, a smooth path, and I just learned that not only that we could do it, but that I could do it. That I could push myself, I could learn the hard things, and that and that I didn't a big thing too is like I didn't have to believe the quote unquote imposter monster, the person in your head that's like, no, you can't do it, the person in your head that was like, this is a dumb idea. I didn't have to be like, I knew that I could overcome that, or now I know that I could overcome that. And yeah, I've learned that you really, it's such a cliche thing, but like when you really like put your mind to it, you know your why, and you're dedicated, and you persevere, you could accomplish what you put your what you want to do.
I love that mindset, that mantra. I can do difficult things.
Yeah.
And that just kind of connects everything for us. And I'm so excited for people to listen and learn from you. And I've learned so much about software engineering and just this. I feel like I'm on the journey with you. So, Nestor, we really appreciate your time and can't wait for everyone to listen. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.